Married for 3 years, she lived like a shadow in that huge, silent mansion. The millionaire never touched her, never showed affection. She was a virgin, innocent, and he never even noticed. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. The rain pounded against the windows of the Hammond estate, with a violence that seemed to echo the repressed feelings of its inhabitants. Isabella Lane ran her hand across the foggy glass, watching the droplets slide down like tears she never allowed herself to shed. 24 years old, 3 of them a prisoner in a marriage that was everything except a marriage. She still remembered the day her father called her into his office, that place that always smelled of expensive cigars and poorly disguised desperation. Richard Lane didn't look her in the eyes when he pronounced the words that would change her life forever. "You're going to marry Nathan Hammond," he said, as if announcing the dinner menu. "It's for the family's good, Isabella. You'll understand when you're older." Older. As if 3 years of solitude and silence had been capable of making her understand the brutality of being sold like cattle in the marketplace of male convenience. Her mother, Margaret, was present that day, but didn't say a word. She just clutched her hands in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor as she always did when her husband made decisions that destroyed pieces of the family's soul. Isabella met Nathan only twice before the wedding. The first time was during a formal dinner at the Hammond house, where he barely directed 3 phrases to her. His hands were large, cold, and when he greeted his future wife, it was as if he were sealing a business deal. No smiles, no kindness. Just a firm handshake and a gaze that passed through her without really seeing her. The second time was on their wedding day, a grandiose ceremony photographed by New York society newspapers, but which had the funeral atmosphere of a wake. Isabella wore a dress that cost nearly $50,000, a gift from the groom, but she felt like a porcelain doll being displayed in a showcase. When Nathan kissed her at the altar, it was such a brief and mechanical touch that she wondered if it had really happened. Nathan Hammond was an imposing figure, 6'1", dark hair always perfectly combed, eyes of such an intense green they seemed dangerous. At 38, he commanded a business empire that extended across several countries in North America. Luxury hotels, construction companies, technology investments, shares in energy companies. Everything he touched turned to gold, everything except his personal life. He learned very early that trusting people was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. His father, Gerald Hammond, had been a cruel man who used emotional blackmail as a control tool. His mother, Eleanor, a sweet and artistic woman, died when Nathan was only 15. A strange accident, never fully clarified, that left the teenager even more closed off and distrustful of the world. Gerald taught his son that love was weakness, that emotions were character flaws, that a real man should be like a machine, efficient, predictable, unbreakable. Nathan absorbed these lessons like poison, building walls around himself so high that not even he could see beyond them anymore. The marriage to Isabella had been imposed by Gerald, even on his deathbed. "That Lane family has connections that interest us," he told his son a few months before dying. "And the girl's father owes us some favors. It's a fair exchange, Nathan. She gets financial security. We consolidate our businesses. Simple as that." Simple. As if it were simple to share a house with a stranger for an indefinite period. As if it were simple to ignore the presence of a young and beautiful woman in the hallways of his own home. As if it were simple to pretend that the muffled sighs he sometimes heard at night coming from the room next to his didn't awaken anything inside him. Isabella quickly learned the unwritten rules of the Hammond mansion. Nathan left early for the office and returned late. When he was home, he stayed locked in his private office or in the gym in the basement. They ate meals at different times, used different bathrooms, had routines that never crossed. It was as if they were ghosts inhabiting the same space, aware of each other's presence but unable to interact. She occupied her days with private lessons she secretly hired. Piano, painting, French, literature. She transformed a small room in the attic into her personal refuge, where she painted somber landscapes that reflected the state of her soul. Canvases showing deserted beaches under stormy skies, forests where light never fully penetrated, faces of women with eyes that silently screamed. Nathan, in turn, immersed himself even deeper in work. He closed international deals, opened new company branches, participated in conferences around the world. Anything that kept him away from home, away from Isabella's disturbing presence. Because, as much as he tried to deny it, there was something about that woman that deeply bothered him. Perhaps it was the grace with which she moved through the house as if floating, instead of walking. Perhaps it was the subtle perfume she wore, which lingered in the air after she passed through rooms. Perhaps it was the sound of the piano she played on nights when she couldn't sleep, melancholy melodies that seemed to translate into notes everything that he himself couldn't express in words. 3 years passed this way. 3 years of ghostly coexistence, of gazes that avoided each other, of conversations limited to good morning and good night. 3 years in which both convinced themselves that this was the normal way to exist, until a storm changed everything. It was a Thursday in March when the downpour hit Boston with unusual fury. The power was cut throughout the Beacon Hill neighborhood, leaving the Hammond mansion plunged into a darkness that seemed to amplify all sounds, all silences, all accumulated tensions. Nathan was reviewing contracts when the lights went out. The office plunged into absolute darkness, and for a few seconds he remained motionless, trying to process the situation. It wasn't common for power to fail in that area of Boston, especially so suddenly. The emergency generator should have turned on automatically, but apparently it had also failed. He fumbled through the desk drawer until he found a powerful flashlight he always kept there. The light cut through the darkness like a blade, revealing the dancing shadows of the office. Nathan decided to check if Isabella was okay. It was his duty, after all, even if they barely spoke. She was technically his responsibility within that house. He climbed the main stairs toward the bedrooms, but didn't find her anywhere. Her room was empty, the bed untouched. Strange. She always retired early, especially on stormy nights. Nathan felt a pang of concern that he preferred to interpret as care for property security. It was then that he heard a muffled noise coming from the upper floor, the attic. Nathan frowned. No one had used that space for years. It was a storage place for old furniture and worthless objects. Why would Isabella be up there in the dark during a storm? He climbed the narrow stairs that led to the attic, each step creaking under his weight. The door was ajar, and a soft light leaked through the crack. Isabella had candles lit inside. Nathan pushed the door without making a sound, prepared to find it. Well, he didn't know exactly what he expected to find. What he saw left him completely paralyzed. The attic had been transformed into a studio. Canvases covered almost all the walls, some finished, others half done. An easel occupied the center of the space, with an in-progress painting depicting a woman from behind, hair loose in the wind, contemplating a turbulent sea. Brushes, paints, palettes scattered on an improvised table. And in the midst of it all, Isabella. She was sitting on the floor back to the door, painting furiously on a small canvas with almost desperate movements. She wore a simple white nightgown and a silk robe that slipped off her shoulders, revealing the bare skin of her back. Her brown hair fell in disorderly waves, some strands sticking to her face from concentration and the heat of the candles. Nathan swallowed hard. In 3 years of marriage, he had never seen Isabella like this. Raw, real, intense. He had always known her as an ethereal figure, almost ghostly, who floated through the house without leaving traces of emotion. But here was a real woman. A woman who created, who felt, who overflowed with life through each brushstroke. The canvases around told a story he had never imagined existed. Melancholy landscapes, yes, but also portraits of a dark sensuality that caught him completely off. God. A feminine hand caressing its own skin, lips parted as if whispering forbidden secrets, eyes burning with an internal fire that Isabella had never shown in real life. My God, muttered Nathan, without realizing he had spoken aloud. Isabella, startled, dropping the brush she was holding. She turned quickly, eyes wide with surprise and something that seemed like pure terror. For a few seconds both remained silent, she on the floor surrounded by her intimate creations, he standing at the door like an intruder caught in the act. I was looking for you, Nathan said, his voice coming out huskier than intended, to see if you were okay with the power outage. Isabella rose quickly, pulling the robe to better cover her body. Her cheeks were flushed, not just from the candlelight but from the humiliation of being discovered. This was her secret sanctuary, the only place where she could truly be herself. You shouldn't be here, she said, her voice trembling. This is my private space. Nathan entered the attic completely, closing the door behind him. He couldn't take his eyes off the paintings that surrounded him. How long have you been doing this? That's none of your business, Isabella replied, but there was more defiance than submission in her voice. He approached one of the larger canvases, an abstract representation of two intertwined figures that could be interpreted as dancing or as fighting, or perhaps both. You have real talent, he murmured, and he wasn't being condescending. It was a genuine observation. Isabella watched him suspiciously. In 3 years, Nathan had never praised anything related to her. In fact, they rarely talked about any subject that wasn't strictly necessary. Why do you hide? He asked, still examining the works. Why keep this a secret? The question caught her off guard. Isabella didn't expect to have to explain her choices, especially to him. Because this is the only place where I can be myself, she answered with an honesty that surprised her. The only place where nobody judges me, where nobody expects me to be the perfect and invisible wife. Nathan turned to face her. The candlelight created dramatic shadows on his face, accentuating his marked features, making the green eyes shine with an almost feline intensity. You think I expect that from you? You don't even see me, Isabella said, and there were years of resentment condensed in those few words. For you, I'm just part of this house's decoration, an object that came with the deal you closed with my father. The comment hit Nathan like a punch to the stomach, because there was a brutal truth there that he couldn't deny. For 3 years, he had treated Isabella exactly like an inconvenient accessory to his life, a presence he tolerated, but never allowed himself to truly know. But now, surrounded by all that art, by all that passion overflowing from the canvases, he realized how blind he had been. Isabella wasn't just beautiful, she was a force of nature, repressed, a storm contained in a small and apparently fragile body. You're wrong, he said, his voice lower, more intimate. I see you, I've always seen you, maybe that's the problem. Isabella felt her heart race. There was something in the way he looked at her now that was completely different, as if he were seeing her for the first time, and at the same time as if he had known her for much longer than the 3 years they had been married. A particularly strong thunderclap echoed outside, making the attic windows vibrate. The rain intensified, beating on the roof with a violence that seemed urgent, as if nature itself were trying to wash away all the years of silence and distance. Nathan took another step toward her. Isabella could feel the heat emanating from his body, could smell the masculine cologne he wore, a mixture of wood and spices that always disturbed her in the rare moments when they crossed paths around the house. Isabella, he said her name, as if it were the first time savoring each syllable. How many secrets do you keep from me? She swallowed hard. How many would you like to know? The question hung in the air between them, charged with a tension that neither knew how to handle. For 3 years they had lived as strangers. Now suddenly, they were dangerously close to becoming something much more complex and frightening. Isabella's question echoed in the attic like a dangerous challenge. Nathan felt something stir inside his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if she had just opened a door he had kept locked since adolescence. Be careful what you offer, he murmured, his voice loaded with a warning that sounded more like a promise. I might want more than you're willing to give. Isabella raised her chin, and for the first time in 3 years, Nathan saw a flash of fire in her eyes. You don't know me well enough to know what I'm capable of. He laughed, but it was a sound, without humor. 3 years living in the same house, Isabella. 3 years observing your habits, your schedules, your little quirks. You think I haven't learned anything about you? What do you know? She challenged, crossing her arms over her chest. The movement made the robe slip even more, revealing the delicate curve of her shoulders. Nathan began to circle around her, like a predator studying its prey. I know you wake up at 6 every morning, even on weekends. I know you drink black coffee without sugar, but add honey when you think no. One is watching. I know you play the piano when you're restless, always the same 3 melancholy songs. Isabella felt a shiver run down her spine. She had no idea he paid attention to these details. I know you have nightmares, Nathan continued, stopping right behind her. His voice was so close to Isabella's ear that she could feel the warmth of his breath on her neck. Because sometimes I hear you cry during the night. You don't know anything, Isabella whispered, but her voice came out shaky. I know you desire me, he said, so low it could have been her imagination. Isabella turned quickly to face him, eyes flashing with indignation. How dare you? The same way I desire you, Nathan interrupted, and the confession came out like an accusation, as if he were furious with himself for admitting it. The silence that followed was dense, loaded with 3 years of repressed tension. They were so close that Isabella could see the small scars Nathan had on his face, marks she had never noticed before. She could count the dark eyelashes that framed those disturbing green eyes. This is madness, she murmured. It is, he agreed, but maybe it's the first honest thing that happens between us. Lightning illuminated the attic for a few seconds, followed by thunder that made the entire house structure tremble, as if the storm outside were echoing the emotional turbulence unfolding between them. Nathan stepped back a few paces, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. I shouldn't be here, he said, more to himself than to her. But you are, Isabella replied. And now, are you going to run away again? Are you going to pretend this conversation never happened? He looked at her with an expression that mixed desire and anger. What do you want from me, Isabella? That I confess I spend sleepless nights, thinking about how it would be to touch you? That sometimes I stand at the door of your room fighting against the urge to enter? The words hit Isabella like an electric shock. For 3 years, she had convinced herself she was invisible to him. Discovering that Nathan also suffered from that undeclared tension shook her certainties. I want honesty, she said. I'm tired of pretending we're strangers. I'm tired of living like a prisoner in my own life. Prisoner, Nathan repeated, and there was a dangerous note in his voice. You have everything any woman could want. A magnificent house, unlimited money, freedom to do whatever you want. Freedom? Isabella laughed bitterly. What freedom is that, Nathan? The freedom to exist in the shadows of your life. The freedom to be a paper wife that you display at social events but ignore at home. Nathan clenched his fists. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, she exploded. Explain to me why you treat me like furniture. Explain to me why you accept this cold and distant marriage as if it were normal. Because it's safer this way, he shouted back, and immediately regretted. The confession. Isabella blinked, surprised by the intensity of the response. Safer for whom? Nathan turned, giving his back to her. His shoulders were tense, as if he were fighting an internal battle. For both of us, he said, his voice lower. You don't know what I'm capable of when I lose control, Isabella. You don't know what kind of man I really am. Then show me, she challenged, approaching him from behind. Stop protecting me from yourself and show me who you really are. Nathan turned slowly, and the look he gave her was loaded with a darkness that made her swallow hard. You don't know what you're asking for. I know exactly what I'm asking for, Isabella responded, raising her chin. I'm asking to stop existing by halves. I'm asking for you to stop treating me as if I were made of crystal. And if I break you? He asked, his voice hoarse. And if I'm stronger than you imagine? Nathan studied her face for long seconds, looking for signs of hesitation, of fear. But Isabella stared back at him with a fierce determination he had never seen before. Slowly, he extended his hand and touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. The touch was soft, almost reverent, But Isabella could feel the tension in every muscle of his arm, as if he were controlling himself from pulling her against him. "You don't know what you're asking me to do," he murmured. "I'm asking you to see me," she whispered. "Really see me." Nathan's fingers slid along her jaw, down her neck, stopping at the point where her pulse beat rapidly. "I see you," he said. "That's exactly the problem. I see you and want things I shouldn't want. I feel things I swore I'd never feel again." Isabella covered his hand with hers, keeping it pressed against her skin. "And why is that so terrible?" Nathan closed his eyes, as if he were feeling pain. "Because the last time I allowed myself to feel something for someone, that person died." The confession came out like an open wound, raw and bleeding. Isabella felt her heart tighten. "Nathan." "My mother," he continued, eyes still closed. "Eleanor. She was like you, an artist, a dreamer full of life, and my father destroyed her, slowly, methodically, until nothing was left of her but a shadow. She died because she loved a man incapable of loving back." Isabella felt tears stinging her eyes. She finally understood why Nathan built such high walls around his heart. "You're not your father." "No?" He opened his eyes and his look was devastated. "What do you think I've been doing to you for 3 years, Isabella? What do you think this marriage is?" "It's different," she insisted. "We can make it different." Nathan removed his hand from her face, backing away again. "I can't risk it. I can't risk you." But even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed the desire he felt, and Isabella, for the first time in 3 years, felt she had some power in that relationship. In the days that followed that stormy night, the dynamics of the house changed completely. Nathan and Isabella could no longer pretend indifference. Their gazes met in the corridors, loaded with a tension that made the air seem denser. Meals, previously solitary, began to be taken together, in a silence that said more than any conversation. Nathan tried to resume his obsessive work routine, but found himself distracted during meetings, thinking about the subtle perfume Isabella wore, about the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating on her paintings. Twice he cancelled business trips at the last minute, inventing vague excuses for his secretary. Isabella, in turn, discovered she had a powerful weapon in her hands, Nathan's attention. She began to use this in a subtle and calculated way. She would appear in his office under the pretext of asking about household matters, always wearing dresses that accentuated her curves or left a piece of skin exposed. When he spoke, she would lean slightly forward, making him lose his train of thought mid-sentence. It was a dangerous game, and both knew it. A week after the discovery of the studio, Nathan decided he needed to take drastic action. He entered the Home Office early in the morning and called the private detective he used for corporate investigations. Marcus Wilson was a discreet and efficient man, specialized in unearthing secrets that people preferred to keep buried. "I need you to investigate everything about Richard Lane," Nathan said on the phone, his voice cold and professional. "I want to know about his business, his debts, his connections, especially the last 5 years. Anything specific I should look for?" Marcus asked. Nathan hesitated. "I want to understand why he handed me his daughter on a silver platter." While waiting for the investigation results, Nathan found himself increasingly obsessed with Isabella. He discreetly installed a security camera in the corridor that led to the attic, just to be able to observe her painting. He spent hours watching the recordings, hypnotized by the way she moved, by the passion that shone through in each artistic gesture. Isabella sensed she was being observed, but far from being bothered, it excited her. She began to paint wearing increasingly provocative clothes, knowing Nathan was probably watching her. It was her way of teasing him from a distance, of showing that she too knew how to play the game of seduction. One night, she painted a nude self-portrait. Not completely nude, but suggestive enough to make any man lose his sanity. She positioned the canvas so it was clearly visible to the camera. It was a direct message. "This is what you're missing." Nathan watched the recording the next day and almost destroyed the computer in anger and desire. How dare she provoke him like that? How dare she show that body he had fantasized about for years, knowing he couldn't touch her? That same night he appeared in the attic without warning. Isabella was there as always, but this time painting an abstract canvas with violent colors, blood reds, deep blacks, golds that looked like fire. "You think you're very clever," Nathan said, leaning against the doorframe. Isabella didn't turn, but a smile played on her lips. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The self-portrait," he said, entering the room and closing the door behind him. "You knew I would see it." "You have cameras in the attic?" she asked, feigning surprise, but still without turning. Nathan approached from behind her, so close that Isabella could feel the heat of his body on her back. "I have cameras throughout the house. It's a matter of security." "Of course," she murmured sarcastically. "Security." He placed his hands on her shoulders, and Isabella felt an electric discharge run through her entire body. "You're playing with fire, Isabella." "And you're watching," she replied, finally turning to face him. "Who is more lost in this game?" Nathan pressed her against the wall, each hand resting beside her head. Their bodies didn't touch, but they were so close that she could feel his breath brushing her lips. "You want to know who's more lost?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "You who exhibit yourself to me like an attention-starved teenager, or me who watches the recordings like a sick voyeur?" Isabella felt her heart race. "At least I have the courage to admit what I want." "And what do you want?" Nathan asked, leaning his face even closer to hers. "You," she whispered. "I want you." Nathan closed his eyes, as if the words had been a physical blow. "Isabella." "Stop fighting against this," she said, raising her hand to touch his face. "Stop pretending you don't feel the same." He grabbed her wrist, preventing the touch. "You don't understand. If I touch you, if I give in to this, there will be no going back." "I don't want to go back," Isabella said, looking directly into his eyes. "I want to go forward. I want to know what it's like to be desired by you." Nathan released her wrist and backed away, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Then teach me," she challenged. Before Nathan could respond, his phone rang. It was Marcus, the detective. Nathan answered, still looking at Isabella. "I found what you wanted to know about Richard Lane." Marcus's voice sounded serious. "But I need to speak in person. It's complicated." Nathan hung up and looked at Isabella with a strange expression. "I need to go out." "Nathan." "We'll continue this conversation later," he said, but there was something in his tone that made Isabella feel a chill of apprehension. 2 hours later, Nathan was sitting in Marcus's office, staring at an open dossier on the desk. The pages contained photographs, bank documents, accident reports, and at the center of it all, a revelation that would forever change the way he saw his marriage. "Richard Lane isn't just a businessman in financial difficulties," Marcus explained. "He's a desperate man. 3 years ago, his company was involved in a money laundering scheme that went wrong. A lot of money disappeared and the right people started asking the wrong questions." Nathan flipped through the documents, processing the information. "What kind of scheme?" "Shell construction companies. Overpricing of public works, the complete package. When the FBI started investigating, Richard desperately needed protection, someone with enough influence to make the problems disappear. And he found that protection in me," Nathan murmured. "Exactly. The marriage to your family gave him the political shield he needed. But there's more," Marcus said, opening another file. "The accident that killed your mother 23 years ago," Nathan looked up, alert. "What does that have to do with this?" Richard Lane was driving the truck that hit her car. The world stopped. Nathan felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "What?" He was young at the time, son of an influential politician. The accident was hushed up, classified as a fatality. But I have the evidence. Richard was drunk and driving at high speed. Your mother was returning from the studio, where she taught painting classes. Nathan rose from the chair so abruptly that it fell. "Does Isabella know about this?" "Unlikely. She was only 1 year old when it happened. Probably not even her parents know you've discovered the connection." Nathan left Marcus's office in a state of shock. During the entire journey back home, a single question hammered in his mind. How could he look at Isabella knowing her father had destroyed his family? And more importantly, how to explain this to her without destroying what was being born between them? Nathan drove back home on autopilot, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Marcus's revelation echoed in his mind like a dark mantra. Richard Lane had killed his mother. The man who handed Isabella to him as payment for a debt was the same one who destroyed his family 23 years ago. Eleanor Hammond was returning from the studio where she taught painting when Richard's truck hit her. Nathan had always known his mother was an artist, had always known she had the same talent he now saw in Isabella. But he had never imagined that the connection between the two women would be so macabre, so cruelly ironic. When he arrived at the mansion, it was almost 11 at night. The house was wrapped in silence, but Nathan knew Isabella would be awake. She always stayed in the attic until late, lost in her canvases and in her own demons, exactly as his mother used to do. He climbed the main stairs, trying to decide what to do with that information. Should he confront Isabella? She was innocent, had no blame for her father's crimes, but how to look at her knowing she carried Richard Lane's blood? How to touch her without thinking about the man who drove drunk on the night Eleanor died? Nathan stopped in front of the door to his own room, but his feet refused to enter. Instead, like an irresistible magnet, he found himself climbing the stairs that led to the attic. He needed to see her. He needed to look into her eyes and try to understand if there was anything of Richard in that face, in those hands that created art instead of destruction. The attic door was ajar, as always. Nathan pushed it slowly and found Isabella exactly where he expected, standing in front of the easel, furiously painting a canvas that depicted two figures drowning in a red sea. She wore only a thin nightgown and was barefoot, her hair tied in a messy bun from which escaped rebellious strands. "You're back," she said without turning, as if she instinctively knew it was him. "I thought you were going to stay out all night." Nathan didn't answer. He stood at the door watching her paint, trying to reconcile the woman he desired with the daughter of the man he hated. Isabella felt the heavy silence and finally turned. What she saw in Nathan's face made her take a step back. There was something wild in his eyes, a mixture of fury, pain, and desire that frightened and excited her at the same time. "What happened?" she asked, dropping the brush. "Tell me about your father," Nathan said, his voice dangerously calm. Isabella frowned. "My father? Why the sudden question?" "Just tell me," he insisted, entering the attic and closing the door behind him. "What kind of man is he?" Isabella hesitated. Talking about Richard Lane always made her uncomfortable. "He's complicated, controlling. He was always very focused on business, never had much time for family." "And what kind of business?" "Construction. Mainly. Why are you interrogating me, Nathan?" He approached her slowly, like a predator circling its prey. "Did your family have money when you were a child?" "We did," Isabella admitted, confused about the direction of the conversation. "But things changed. My father always said it was bad investments, wrong decisions." "Wrong decisions," Nathan repeated, and there was venom in his voice. "It's interesting how some men use euphemisms for crimes." "Crimes?" Isabella felt her blood freeze. "What are you talking about?" Nathan stopped right in front of her, so close that Isabella could see the anger flaming in his green eyes. "Tell me, Isabella, did your father ever mention an accident? Something that happened about 23 years ago?" The question caught her completely off guard. Isabella didn't know about any accident, had never heard her father talk about anything like that. But something in Nathan's expression made her understand she was about to discover a truth that would change everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. "Of course you don't know," Nathan said, his tone loaded with bitterness. "Why would you know? Why would your father tell his beloved daughter that he killed an innocent woman while driving drunk?" Isabella's world collapsed. "What?" "Eleanor Hammond," Nathan pronounced the name like a painful prayer. "My mother. Your father killed her in a traffic accident when I was 15. and now I discover that all this time you are his daughter." Isabella felt her legs falter. She leaned against the wall, trying to process the information. "This can't be true." "I have the evidence," Nathan said, pulling his phone from his pocket. He showed her some of the photos Marcus had provided. "Police reports, hospital documents. Your father was drunk, driving at high speed. My mother was returning from the studio where she taught painting classes." Tears began to stream down Isabella's face. "Nathan, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "Didn't know," he repeated, as if testing the taste of the words, "just as you didn't know that your father handed you to me as payment for political protection, just as you didn't know that our marriage was architected to cover up his crimes." "What crimes?" "Money laundering, corruption, overpricing schemes," Nathan enumerated coldly. "Your father is a criminal, Isabella, and I'm the idiot who fell in love with his daughter." The confession came out like a slap, unexpected and brutal. Isabella's eyes widened. "You fell in love?" Nathan laughed, but it was a sound without joy. "Ironic, isn't it? Spending 3 years avoiding you, building walls, protecting myself, only to discover in the end that you are exactly what should destroy me." "Nathan, please." "Please what?" he exploded. "You want me to forget that your father killed my mother? You want me to pretend that doesn't matter because I have feelings for you?" Isabella approached him, hands extended in a gesture of supplication. "I am not my father. I didn't know any of this." "But you carry his blood," Nathan said, grabbing her wrists. "You carry the DNA of the man who destroyed my family. And you carry the DNA of the man who bought a wife as if she were cattle," Isabella retorted, finding strength to fight. "Your father wasn't a saint either, Nathan. Gerald Hammond was known for his questionable methods. Don't you dare compare—" "Why not?" she interrupted. "Why is my father the only villain in this story? Do you think I chose to be here? Do you think I wanted to be sold as currency?" Nathan squeezed her wrists harder. "At least my father never killed anyone." "Are you sure about that?" Isabella challenged. "Are you sure Gerald Hammond never did anything that caused someone's death? Men like him rarely keep their hands clean." The observation hit Nathan like a punch, because there was a truth there he had never wanted to examine. Gerald really wasn't a clean man. There were rumors, whispers about brutal methods, about people who simply disappeared when they became inconvenient. "This is different," he murmured, but without conviction. "Is it?" Isabella asked, tears still flowing. "Or do you just want it to be different because it hurts less to think so?" Nathan released her abruptly and backed away. "I need time to process this. Time to decide if you still want me, or if the hatred for my father is stronger," she asked, and there was a raw pain in her voice. Nathan looked at her for long seconds, memorizing every detail of her face. Maybe that's it. He turned and left the attic, leaving Isabella alone with her canvases, her tears, and the crushing weight of a past she never knew existed. In the days that followed, Nathan returned to the mode from before the storm. Cold, distant, avoiding any unnecessary contact. But now there was something even crueler in his absence. Isabella could feel the latent hatred, the internal struggle he was fighting between desire and repulsion. And for the first time since arriving at that house, she began to plan her escape. Isabella spent 3 days meticulously planning her escape. Nathan had resumed his obsessive work routine, leaving the house before dawn and returning after midnight. It was as if he were trying to punish himself, or maybe punish her, through total absence. During these days of renewed coldness, Isabella felt something inside her harden. The pain of the discovery about her father transformed into anger. Anger at having been used as a bargaining chip. Anger at having spent 3 years of her life in a marriage that was built on lies and blood. Anger at having fallen in love with a man who rejected her for the actions of a father she herself despised. Because yes, she had fallen in love with Nathan. She admitted this to herself while packing her few personal possessions in a small suitcase. She had fallen in love with the man she discovered in the attic that stormy night, with the man who looked at her as if he wanted to devour her soul. But now that same man looked at her as if she were a disease he needed to cure. Isabella waited until a Thursday, Nathan had a board meeting in Hartford that would keep him away until late afternoon. The house staff had their days off on Thursdays, leaving the mansion practically empty. It was the perfect opportunity. She took only the essentials, some clothes, painting materials, the few personal documents she possessed, and the money she had managed to save from the allowances Nathan gave her. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for a few months if she was careful. Before leaving, Isabella climbed one last time to the attic. She looked at all the canvases she had painted over those 3 years. They were pieces of her soul scattered throughout that room. She chose only one to take, the self-portrait she had painted to provoke Nathan. It was a bitter reminder, but also a symbol of her own strength. She left a letter on the easel. Few words, but each one heavy as lead. Nathan, I can no longer live as a prisoner of crimes I didn't commit and of a love you can't accept. Don't look for me, Isabella. She left the mansion around 2 in the afternoon, taking only a small suitcase and a bag with painting materials. She took a taxi to South Station and bought a ticket to Stockbridge. It was a place she had always wanted to know, a small town in the Berkshires where she could start over far from Boston's demons. Nathan returned home at 7 in the evening, earlier than usual. He had cancelled the business dinner, feeling restless, without knowing exactly why. The house was strangely silent, but he attributed this to the fact that it was Thursday. It was only when he went up to take a shower that he noticed Isabella's bedroom door open. Strange. She always kept the door closed. He pushed it completely and felt his blood freeze. The closet was open and empty, the vanity clean. No sign that anyone had inhabited that room. Nathan ran to the attic, the steps creaking under his feet. He found the letter on the easel, next to the unfinished painting of the Red Sea. He read the words once, twice, 3 times, as if he could make them change meaning through repetition. Don't look for me. The phrase echoed in his mind like a gunshot. Isabella had escaped. Really escaped. Had left his life without looking back, exactly as he thought he wanted her to do. So why did it feel like someone had ripped out a piece of his chest? Nathan descended the stairs in lurches, pulling his cell phone from his pocket. He called Marcus, the detective. I need you to find someone, he said as soon as Marcus answered. Isabella ran away. How did you? Doesn't matter. I need you to find her. Now. Nathan, maybe it's better to let her go. Considering everything we discovered. Find her, Nathan repeated, his voice dangerously low. And don't make me repeat myself. While Marcus began the search, Nathan paced through the mansion like a caged animal. Every room seemed to echo Isabella's absence. The silent piano in the music room, the garden where she liked to read on sunny afternoons, the kitchen where he sometimes found her drinking coffee in the middle of the night when neither of them could sleep. Why had she gone? Wasn't this what he wanted? Hadn't he spent the last few days treating her coldly, precisely to create distance between them? But now that she was really gone, Nathan realized the brutal difference between having Isabella in the house and ignoring her, and not having Isabella in the house at all. One was a painful choice, but still a choice. The other was simply emptiness. At 2 in the morning, Marcus called. I found her Stockbridge. She's staying at a simple inn in the center of town. Nathan didn't hesitate. Send me the address. I'm going there now. Nathan, it's 2 in the morning and there's fog in the mountains. Maybe it's better to wait until... Send the address, Nathan repeated, already grabbing the car keys. The trip to Stockbridge took 2.5 hours, driving on the winding road amid dense fog. Nathan made the journey in a state of trance, his mind focused on only one thing, finding Isabella and bringing her back. But bringing her back to what? To continue the cycle of desire and rejection? To torture her with his own inability to forgive the past? He arrived at the inn when the sun was beginning to rise, tinting the fog with golden hues. It was a simple and welcoming place, the kind of place Isabella would choose. Nathan parked the car and sat for a few minutes, trying to decide what to do next. What right did he have to go after her? What right did he have to drag Isabella back to a life she had clearly rejected? But then he remembered the words she had said in the attic. "I am not my father," and for the first time he really heard the truth in them. Isabella was not Richard Lane. She was just a victim of the same man who had destroyed Nathan's family. He got out of the car and headed to the inn's reception. The young woman who attended was young and friendly, but when Nathan asked about Isabella, she hesitated. "I'm sorry, but I can't give information about guests." Nathan sighed. "I'm her husband. We had a fight, and she left home. I just want to talk." The receptionist studied him for a few seconds, clearly assessing if he looked dangerous. She must have decided he didn't, because she sighed and said, "Room 12. But she specifically asked not to be disturbed. Nathan climbed the wooden stairs that creaked softly under his feet. He stopped in front of room 12's door, his hand raised to knock. He could hear soft music coming from inside. Classical. Piano, Chopin. He took a deep breath and knocked 3 times softly. The music stopped. Footsteps approached the door. "Who is it?" "It's me," Nathan said simply. There was a long silence. Then Isabella's voice, lower. "Go away, Nathan. I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about." "We do," he insisted. "I have a lot to tell you." Another silence. Nathan rested his forehead against the wooden door. "Please, Isabella, 5 minutes." Finally, he heard the sound of the key turning in the lock. The door opened slowly, revealing Isabella in a simple robe, her hair loose and her eyes swollen. From crying, she was more beautiful than ever, and at the same time more fragile. 5 minutes, she said, without backing away to let him enter. Nathan gently pushed the door and entered the small but cozy room. There was a canvas on the dresser, a landscape of the mountains viewed from the window. Isabella had started painting again. "How did you find me?" she asked, crossing her arms over her chest. "Does that matter?" "It matters to me to know if I'll have to run away again." Nathan turned to face her, and what he saw in her eyes destroyed him. Fear. She was afraid of him, afraid of what he might do, what he might say to hurt her even more. "Isabella," he said, his voice broken. "I'm so sorry." The words "I'm sorry" hung in the air of the small room like a fragile offering. Isabella looked at Nathan with surprise. In 3 years of marriage, she had never heard him apologize for anything, not even for the small rough patches of daily life. "Sorry for what?" she asked, her voice careful. "For treating me like trash? For blaming me for my father's crimes, or for discovering that you fell in love with the wrong person?" Nathan closed his eyes, absorbing each word like a deserved blow. For all of that, and for much more, Isabella remained standing near the door, keeping her distance. She wasn't going to make things easy for him, not after how he had treated her. What kind of much more? For having treated you like a ghost for 3 years, for having ignored you when you were the only real thing in my life, Nathan said, his voice gaining intensity, for having been a coward who preferred to hurt you rather than admit what he felt. "And what did you feel?" Isabella asked, even knowing the answer could destroy or save her. Nathan looked at her directly. "Fear, pure terror of falling in love with you and repeating my father's mistakes, terror of loving you and destroying you in the process." "So you decided to destroy me before even trying to love me?" The observation hit Nathan like a slap. Yes, that's exactly what I did." Isabella approached the window, contemplating the mountain landscape wrapped in morning mist. "You know what I discovered in these days here, Nathan? I discovered that I'm stronger than I imagined. I discovered that I can live without you." The words were like knife stabs in his chest. "Isabella, I can paint without hiding my canvases. I can sleep without nightmares. I can wake up without feeling like I'm walking on glass," she continued, still with her back to him. "For the first time in 3 years, I breathe." Nathan approached, stopping a few steps from her. "And that makes you happy?" Isabella turned, and there were tears in her eyes. "No, that makes me free. They're different things. So you're not happy. How can I be happy knowing I fell in love with a man who sees me as the enemy's daughter?" she asked, her voice breaking. How can I be happy knowing that our love was born on top of corpses? Nathan extended his hand, but stopped mid-movement without touching her. Isabella, you're not responsible for my mother's death. You're not responsible for your father's crimes, I know that now. Knowing and feeling are different things, she replied. You might rationally know I'm not to blame, but will you be able to look at me without seeing his face? Will you be able to touch me without remembering what he did? The question exposed the wound at the heart of the problem. Nathan remained silent for long seconds, struggling with his own honesty. I don't know, he finally admitted, but I want to try to find out. Why? Isabella asked. Why now? Why after treating me like a dead weight? Do you decide you want to try? Nathan ran his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration she knew well. Because when you left home, when I read that letter, it was as if they had ripped the heart from my chest. Because I spent 2 hours driving in the middle of the night through the mountains with fog, risking my life just to have the chance to see you again. That's not love, Nathan, it's possessiveness. Is it? He approached more until she could feel the heat of his body. Then explain to me why I spent all night thinking about how you would be sleeping alone if you would be cold, if you would be scared. Explain to me why the first thing I thought when I saw your canvases was how talented you are, how strong, how brave for having created all that beauty amid so much suffering. Isabella felt her heart race. Nathan, explain to me why, when I think about the possibility of you really leaving my life forever, it's as if the world lost all its colors, he continued, his voice becoming hoarser. Is that possessiveness? Or is it a desperately in-love man who doesn't know how to deal with his own feelings? She studied him for long seconds, looking for signs of manipulation, of falsehood. But what she saw in his green eyes was only raw vulnerability. Nathan Hammond, the man who built walls as a profession, was completely exposed before her. You hurt me, she whispered. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that if you let me. How? Isabella asked. How will you make up for 3 years of loneliness? How will you make up for having rejected me when I needed you most? Nathan took a deep breath. By doing something I've never done in my life. What thing? Trusting someone completely. Giving my heart without guarantees, he said, raising his hand to touch her face. This time he didn't stop mid-movement. His fingers traced the line of her cheek with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. Trusting you. Trusting us. Isabella closed her eyes at the touch. It was the first time in 3 years that Nathan touched her with genuine tenderness. And if it doesn't work, then at least we will have really tried. At least we won't spend the rest of our lives asking ourselves, what if? She opened her eyes and met his gaze. I'm not her, Nathan. I'm not your mother. I won't let myself be destroyed for love. I know. And maybe that's exactly what I need. Someone strong enough to love me without losing themselves in the process. Isabella covered his hand with hers, keeping it pressed against her face. You really want to try? I do, he said, without hesitation. But not here, not as fugitives. I want to try at home with honesty, without secrets. Our home is full of ghosts, Isabella observed. Then let's exorcise them together. She studied him once more, weighing her options. She could stay there in Stockbridge, build a new life away from the demons of the past. It would be safe, predictable. Or she could bet on this complicated and wounded man, on this love that promised to be as intense as it was dangerous. If I return, she finally said, some things will have to change. Everything, Nathan agreed. Everything will have to change. Isabella nodded slowly. Then kiss me. What? You heard me. If you really want me to believe this is more than possessiveness, if you want me to believe you can see me as a woman and not as your enemy's daughter, kiss me. Nathan hesitated for only a second. Then he pulled her to him with an intensity that made her gasp. His lips found hers, with a hunger that had been repressed for 3 years too long. It wasn't a sweet or romantic kiss. It was devastating, desperate, loaded with all the pain, all the desire, all the frustration that had accumulated between them. Isabella surrendered completely, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his as if she wanted to disappear into his skin. When they separated, both were breathless. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "Now I understand," he murmured. "What? Why my father destroyed my mother? Because when you love someone like this, so intensely that it hurts, the fear of losing that person can make you do terrible things." Isabella held his face between her hands. "But you won't destroy me, and do you know why?" "Why?" "Because I won't let you, and because you are better than you think you are." Nathan opened his eyes and looked at her as if she were a miracle. "Come back with me?" "I will," she whispered, "but this time we'll do it our way." The return. Journey to Boston was made in contemplative silence. Isabella in the passenger seat, watching the mountain landscape give way to urban concrete, while Nathan drove with one hand intertwined with hers. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried the weight of a revolution. For the first time in 3 years, they touched without tension, without fear, without the feeling of doing something forbidden. When they arrived at the Hammond mansion, it was mid-afternoon on Friday. The house seemed different to Isabella's eyes, as if it had been transformed during her brief absence. Or maybe it was she who had changed. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been forced into an arranged marriage. She was a woman who had proven her own strength, who had escaped and been brought back not by force but by love. "Do you want to go up and rest?" Nathan asked when they entered the main hall. "Actually," Isabella said, releasing herself from him and walking toward the stairs, "I want to show you something." Nathan followed her, intrigued. Instead of going to her room or to the attic, Isabella stopped in front of the door to his room. She had never entered there. It was forbidden territory, part of the unwritten rules that governed the house. "May I?" she asked, her hand on the doorknob. Nathan nodded, curious to see her reaction. Isabella pushed the door and entered the male sanctuary. The room was exactly as she had imagined, austere, elegant, dominated by shades of black and grey. A king-size bed occupied the center, flanked by dark mahogany nightstands. There was a leather armchair near the window, a meticulously organized desk, a walk-in closet that probably cost more than the house where she grew up. But what most caught her attention was the total absence of personal objects. No photographs, no souvenirs, no indication that someone really lived in that space. It was like a luxury hotel room, beautiful but empty of soul. "It's exactly as I imagined," she said, walking to the window that overlooked the garden. "And how did you imagine it?" "Perfect, controlled, without a single thing out of place." Isabella turned to face him. "Without a single real thing." Nathan frowned. "It's been my room for 15 years. "No," she shook her head. "It's a room where you sleep. A bedroom has personality, has history, has life. This here is just a functional space." She approached the dresser and opened the first drawer. Nathan took a step forward, instinctively protective of his privacy, but stopped when he saw that Isabella wasn't being invasive. She was just proving a point. "Underwear organized by color," she commented, closing the drawer and opening the E. "Second, socks folded geometrically, T-shirts stacked as if they were documents." She looked at him with an expression that mixed tenderness and sadness. "Nathan, you don't live, you just exist." "And what would be the difference?" "The difference is that living involves taking risks. Living involves messiness, imperfection, spontaneity." Isabella sat on his bed, a gesture that made Nathan's heart race. "Living involves letting someone else disorganize your sock drawer." Nathan approached slowly. "You want to disorganize my sock drawer?" "I want to disorganize much more than that," she said, pulling him by the cuff of his shirt until he sat beside her on the bed. "I want you to let me mess up your whole life. I want to leave my books scattered across your desk. I want you to wake up with the smell of my creams on the pillow next to you. I want to argue about which movie to watch, where to have dinner, whether or not we should adopt a dog." Nathan looked at her as if she were speaking a foreign language. "A dog?" Isabella laughed, and the sound echoed through the room like music. You can't even imagine that, can you? Someone depending on you beyond business. Someone who doesn't care if you're a billionaire or not, who just wants your attention. I wouldn't know how to take care of a dog. Neither would I. We would learn together. We would make mistakes together. It would be imperfect and chaotic and wonderful. Nathan extended his hand and touched her face. You're talking about much more than a dog. I'm talking about building a real life. Isabella covered his hand with hers. About stopping being afraid to feel, to live, to love. Nathan pulled her closer until she was sitting on his lap. Their faces were close enough that he could count the almost invisible freckles on her nose. What if I don't know how to do that? He asked, his voice vulnerable. Then I'll teach you, Isabella whispered, leaning in to kiss him again. This time the kiss was different, less desperate, more exploratory, as if they were getting to know each other for the first time, discovering textures, flavors, possibilities. Nathan wrapped her in his arms, pulling her even closer to him, and Isabella felt something melt inside her chest. When they separated, she rested her forehead against his. Now tell me about her. About whom? Your mother, Eleanor. I want to know who she really was, not just how she died. Nathan tensed. Isabella, please. If we're going to do this right, if we're going to build something real, there can't be ghosts between us. Talk to me about her. Nathan sighed but didn't move away. She was light. Wherever she went, she illuminated the environment, laughed at everything, saw beauty in the simplest things, painted watercolor flowers that hung all over the house, even with my father complaining they were too colorful. How were you together? She taught me to paint. A sad smile played on his lips. I was terrible, but she always found something to praise, said I had an eye for colors even when I painted blue horses and purple trees. Isabella felt her heart tighten. You stopped painting after she died? I stopped doing many things after she died, Nathan admitted. My father said art was a waste of time, that real men didn't play with paints and brushes. And you believed him? I was 15. I was destroyed. I believed everything he said, because it was easier than feeling pain. Isabella rose from his lap and walked to the desk. She opened the first drawer, then the second, looking for something. What are you doing? Searching, she said, opening the third drawer. Ah, found it. She pulled out a notepad and some pens. She returned to the bed and sat facing Nathan, placing the pad between them. What is this? Your first lesson in how to live, Isabella said, offering a pen to him. Let's draw together. Isabella, I haven't drawn in more than 20 years. Perfect. Then you don't have habits to unlearn, she smiled. Draw something that makes you happy. Nathan looked at the pen as if it were a venomous snake. I don't even know where to start. Start anywhere. The important thing isn't the result, it's the process. After a few minutes of hesitation, Nathan began to sketch something on the paper. Hesitant, insecure strokes, but gradually gaining confidence. Isabella observed in silence, painting her own creation beside him. When they finished, she looked at his drawing and felt tears stinging her eyes. It was a simple but recognizable portrait, her face with the large and expressive eyes he had observed so carefully. Is this how you see me? She asked. This is how you saved me, Nathan replied. With these eyes that see good things in me, even when I can't see them. Isabella showed her own drawing, two intertwined hands, simple but powerful in its symbolism. And this is how I see our future, she said, together, side by side, no longer one in the shadow of the other. Nathan took her drawing and studied it for long seconds. Isabella, there's something I need to tell you about your father. What about him? I had everything about his crimes investigated. I have enough evidence to completely destroy him, to send him to prison for the rest of his life. Isabella felt her blood freeze. And are you going to do that? Nathan looked into her eyes. I don't know. That's what I wanted before, but now I have you to think about too. And I know that no matter what he did, he's still your father. He was never really my father, Isabella said, her voice firm. A father doesn't sell his daughter to save his own skin. A father doesn't build his life on corpses and expect his children to carry the weight. So you wouldn't mind if I would mind, she interrupted him, but not for the reason you imagine. I would mind because I don't want you to carry more guilt. You already carry enough guilt for your mother's death, even though it wasn't your responsibility. I don't want you to carry the guilt of having destroyed my father too. Nathan pulled her to him again. What do you suggest then? That we let the past bury the past, Isabella said. That we focus on building our future instead of destroying our past. But even as she spoke, both knew that the past rarely remains buried. And Richard Lane wasn't the type of man who would exit the scene silently. 2 weeks passed in a bubble of happiness that Nathan had never imagined possible. He and Isabella were relearning to live together, but this time as a real couple. They had breakfast together, talked about the day's plans, shared the bed, not just to sleep but for intimate conversations that extended into the early hours. Nathan had changed his work routine. Instead of leaving before dawn, he now worked a few hours at home in the morning, only going to the office after lunch. He wanted to be present, wanted to participate in the life they were building. Isabella had transformed the attic into a real studio, with Nathan enthusiastically financing everything she needed. Professional quality paints, large canvases, imported brushes. He loved watching her work, hypnotized by the absolute concentration she showed when painting. But the past, like a wounded beast, never stays quiet for long. On a Monday morning, Nathan was reviewing contracts in the library when Margaret, the housekeeper, appeared at the door with a worried expression. "Mr. Hammond, there's a man at the front door asking to speak with Mrs. Isabella. Says he's her father." Nathan felt his blood freeze. Richard Lane had never set foot in the Hammond mansion. During 3 years of marriage, he had maintained a respectful distance, as if the agreement between them was sufficient for any necessary communication. "Where is Isabella?" Nathan asked, closing the laptop. "In the studio, sir. Do you want me to call her?" "No, tell Mr. Lane to wait in the visiting room. I'll speak to him first." Nathan climbed the stairs quickly, finding Isabella bent over a canvas that depicted a garden in shades of gold and green. She was so concentrated that she didn't hear when he entered. "Isabella," he said softly. She turned, her face lighting up with the smile she now reserved only for him. "Hi, I thought you were going to work until later." "Your father is here," Nathan said without preamble. The smile instantly disappeared from her face. "My father? Why would he come here?" "I don't know, but it can't be anything good." Isabella put down the brush and cleaned her hands on a cloth. "Where is he?" "In the visiting room. I want to talk to him first before you come down." "No," Isabella shook her head. "Whatever he came to say, I want to hear it. I'm tired of other people making decisions about my life without consulting me." Nathan hesitated. He wanted to protect her, but also knew she was right. They had already agreed there would be no more secrets between them. "Then let's go together," he said, extending his hand. They descended the stairs hand in hand, a silent demonstration of unity. In the visiting room, Richard Lane was pacing, back and forth like a caged animal. When he saw the couple enter, his eyes fixed on their intertwined hands with an expression of displeasure. "Isabella," he said, completely ignoring Nathan, "I need to speak with you, in private." "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my husband," Isabella responded, her voice firm. Richard laughed, but it was a sound without humor. "Husband? You really think you can play happy home after everything?" "What are you talking about?" Isabella asked. Richard turned to Nathan, his eyes shining with a malice that made all the alarms sound in the businessman's mind. "Didn't tell her, Hammond? Didn't tell her you discovered our little secret?" Nathan felt Isabella tense beside him. "What secret?" "The secret about how your dear husband plans to destroy me," Richard said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I have here copies of all the investigation he had done on me. Very detailed, I must say." Nathan clenched his fists. How had Richard gotten that? Marcus was discreet and reliable. Unless... Was it Marcus who gave you this? Nathan asked. Marcus has family, Hammond, young children. It's impressive how cooperative people become when you present the right motivations. You threatened his family? Isabella asked, horrified. I protected my interests, Richard turned to his daughter. Just as I'm doing now. I've come to get you, Isabella. Enough of this farce. Farce? She repeated. You really think he loves you? Richard laughed again. He's planning to send me to prison, daughter. And when that happens, when my name is smeared in all the newspapers, do you think he'll want to stay married to the criminals? Daughter? Isabella looked at Nathan, searching for denial in his eyes, but what she saw was guilt. Nathan? I have the evidence, he admitted, his voice low, but I haven't decided what to do with it. Haven't decided, Richard intervened. Or are you waiting for the right moment to stab me in the back? Shut up, Nathan exploded. You have no moral standing to talk about betrayal after what you did. What I did was survive, Richard retorted, in a world where people like you step on people like me without thinking twice. You killed my mother. It was an accident, Richard shouted back. A terrible accident that haunts me every day of my life. An accident that you covered up. An accident that happened because you were driving drunk. Nathan took a step forward, fury radiating from his body. Isabella placed herself between the two men, hands extended. Stop this now. Come with me, Isabella, Richard said, extending his hand to his daughter. Before it's too late. Before he destroys you like he planned to destroy me. I'm not going anywhere, Isabella said, but her voice trembled. No? Richard smiled coldly. Then maybe you should know the whole truth about your precious husband. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. What truth? The truth about why Gerald Hammond really died, Richard said, observing Nathan's reaction. You think it was cancer, that it was natural. Your father was poisoned, Hammond. Slowly, over months. That's a lie, Nathan whispered. Is it? Richard pulled another document from his pocket. Toxicological exam I had done in secret. Arsenic. Administered in small doses over a prolonged period. Isabella looked at Nathan, who was as pale as a ghost. Nathan, did you know about this? No, he shook his head. No. But do you know who had access to his food every day? Richard continued, relentless. Do you know who controlled his medications? Who was always by his side during the illness? Nathan felt the world collapse. Eleanor, he whispered. Your mother, Hammond, your precious mother poisoned Gerald Hammond. My collision with her car wasn't an accident. It was justice. Lie, Nathan exploded. My mother would never... Your mother was a desperate woman, married to a cruel man who psychologically tortured her for years, Richard said. She was planning to run away with you, but she needed the money. Gerald kept everything in safes, accounts that only he controlled. The only way for you to have access to the inheritance was if he died. Stop, Isabella whispered, tears streaming down her face. She sought me out, Richard continued, wanted my help to leave the country with you. Offered money, a lot of money, if I helped you two disappear. But when I discovered what she had done... You killed her, Nathan said, his voice hoarse with pain. I confronted her. There was an argument. She ran, got into the car, and I followed her. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, but she was. Hysterical, driving without looking where she was going. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan was destroyed, processing the information that his mother, the woman he idolized, could have been a murderer. Isabella was torn between consoling her husband and processing that her father had basically confessed to homicide. Why? She finally asked. Why are you telling this now? Because I won't let him destroy me based on a false moral sense, Richard said. We all have blood on our hands, Isabella. The difference is that some of us admit it. Nathan raised his eyes, and there was a deadly coldness in them that made Isabella step back. Get out of my house. Nathan, get out, he shouted, and his voice echoed throughout the mansion. Richard smiled and headed for the door. I'll give you 2 days to decide. Either destroy this evidence against me or everything I just told leaks to the press, and then, Hammond, we'll see which of us comes out more wounded from this war. After Richard left, Nathan and Isabella remained alone in the room, surrounded by the ruins of everything they believed about their families. For 2 hours, Nathan and Isabella sat in silence in the library, each lost in their own devastating thoughts. The weight of Richard's revelations hung over them like a toxic cloud, poisoning the air they breathed. Nathan was destroyed. The image he always had of his mother, a sweet and innocent woman, victim of a cruel husband, had been shattered. Eleanor had poisoned Gerald. His mother was a murderer, and he had spent more than 20 years hating Richard Lane for an accident that perhaps had been justice. Isabella observed her husband in silence, seeing the pain etched in every line of his face. She wanted to console him, but how? How to offer comfort when she had discovered that her own father had confessed to a homicide disguised as an accident? "I don't know what's true anymore," Nathan finally murmured, his voice hoarse. "The truth is that our parents are complex people who made terrible choices," Isabella said softly. "But that doesn't define who we are." Nathan laughed bitterly. "Doesn't it? Isabella, my mother killed my father. Your father killed my mother. How does that not define us?" "Because we choose to be different," she approached him, placing her hand over his. "Because when we had the chance to destroy each other, we chose to love each other. Because we're here together instead of taking revenge on each other." Nathan looked at their intertwined hands. "Your father is right. If I use this evidence against him, you'll be marked as a criminal's daughter. Your life will be destroyed. Don't use it. He will remain free, knowing he has power over us," Isabella replied, living with the constant threat that he could reveal information about Eleanor at any moment. Nathan stood up and walked to the window, contemplating the garden where Isabella liked to read. "There is a third option." "What?" "We reveal everything. Voluntarily. We tell our version of the story before he tells his." Isabella felt her heart race. "Nathan, that would be social suicide?" He turned to face her. "Probably. But it would also be freedom. Freedom to live without blackmail, without secrets, without ghosts. And if no one accepts our version, what if the world condemns us?" Nathan approached her, taking her face between his hands. "Then we'll face it together, you and I against the world if necessary." Isabella studied the green eyes she had learned to love. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure of one thing. I don't want to live a life built on lies. I don't want our love to be hostage to our parents' crimes. And if we lose everything—" Nathan smiled, and for the first time in hours there was light in his eyes. "Isabella, I already lost everything once when you ran away from me. I discovered I can lose money, social position, even the company. But I can't lose you. As long as I have you, I have everything." 2 tears streamed down her face. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you more," he replied, sealing the words with a tender kiss. That same night, Nathan called the main media outlets in the country. He scheduled interviews, prepared documents, structured a plan to tell the complete truth about the two families. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be honest. The next morning, before any interview was conducted, Richard Lane appeared again at the mansion. This time there was no arrogance in his bearing. He seemed tired, defeated. "I heard you're going to reveal everything," he said, when Nathan and Isabella received him in the visiting room. "How did you know?" Nathan asked. "I have. My sources, I always have." Richard sat heavily in an armchair. "I came to make a proposal." "We're not interested in negotiating," Isabella said. "It's not a negotiation, it's a confession." Richard looked at his daughter. "I want to turn myself into the police, take responsibility for my crimes." Nathan frowned. "Why?" "Because I'm tired," Richard sighed. "Tired of running, of threatening, of living looking over my shoulder, and because—" He looked at Isabella. "Because I don't want my daughter to pay for my mistakes more than she already has." "Dad." "I'm not your father, Isabella. I never was. A father protects his children, doesn't use them as bargaining chips." Richard stood up. "I'm going to present myself to the FBI today. I'll tell everything. The corruption schemes, the accident with Eleanor, everything." "And about the poisoning of my father?" Nathan asked. Richard hesitated. I'll leave that for you to decide. Eleanor is dead. She can no longer defend herself. Maybe it's better that some secrets are buried with the dead." Nathan and Isabella exchanged glances. It was a peace offering, a way to protect Eleanor's memory without letting Richard go unpunished for his own crimes. "I accept," Nathan finally said, "but with one condition." "What?" "You completely remove yourself from our lives forever. We don't want to know about you. We don't want contact. We don't want anything." Richard nodded. "That's fair." He turned to Isabella. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I hope that one day you find peace." "I already have," Isabella said, intertwining her hand with Nathan's, "and it wasn't through you." After Richard left, Nathan cancelled the interviews with the press. There was no longer any need. The truth would come out through official channels when Richard turned himself in, but they would no longer be hostages to the past. 6 months later, Nathan and Isabella were in their new home, not an ostentatious mansion in Beacon Hill, but a cozy house in Cambridge, with a garden large enough for the golden retriever they had adopted, Apollo, and an art studio with perfect natural light for Isabella's paintings. Nathan had sold a large part of his businesses, keeping only the companies that really gave him pleasure to manage. He discovered he didn't need so much money to be happy. He needed only a real life, with a real woman, full of wonderful imperfections. Isabella thrived. Her paintings began to be recognized in the artistic community. She had her first solo exhibition scheduled for the next month. She was an artist in her own right, no longer the invisible wife of a magnate. "Do you regret it?" she asked one night, as they lay in the garden looking at the stars. Apollo slept between them, snoring softly. "Regret what?" "Having chosen a simple life, having given up the empire to have just this." Nathan turned to look at her. "Isabella, I spent my whole life building an empire to impress people who didn't love me. Now I have a woman who loves me even when I wake up with messy hair and morning breath." She laughed. "You don't have morning breath." "Yes, I do, and you still love me." "I really do." She moved closer and kissed his face. "Forever." Nathan pulled her closer, feeling her familiar perfume, the known warmth of her body. "You know what I discovered?" "What?" "That love isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. It's about choosing every day to love the same person, even knowing all their flaws, even knowing she leaves paint scattered around the studio, even knowing she steals all the blankets during the night, even knowing he gets grumpy when he doesn't have coffee before 9, even knowing she cries at dog movies." Isabella laughed, but there were tears of happiness in her eyes. "We did it, didn't we?" "Did what?" "Build a real life, a life of our own." Nathan looked at the simple but full of life house, at the dog they had chosen together, at the woman who had transformed his empty existence into something full of meaning. "We did," he agreed. "And it's better than anything I could have built alone." That night, as Isabella slept in his arms, Nathan thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had begun with a cold contract, gone through devastating revelations, almost ended in mutual destruction. But love had won. Not an easy or perfect love, but a love forged in honesty, tempered by pain and strengthened by the daily choice to be together. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Hammond slept without nightmares, holding the woman who had saved his soul and whom he had chosen to love forever. Outside the windows of the house in Cambridge, Boston pulsed with its eternal energy.